Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be doing a mix of a you choose, but for a variety of different topics. So first off, we are going to have a you choose a specific book that I'm going to be picking up, and I'll get more into that in just a moment. And then additionally, I'm going to fill you in on all of the books that I'm planning to check out for the steampunk video that I'm doing. But this is where it's not just a book that is being decided on, but also what my next A Fantasy Fan Reads video is going to be about. I thought maybe we could brainstorm some subgenres or even just separate genres to have some ideas floating around, and then I'll try to narrow it down for a community tab vote, and then we'll decide from there. But we have a few different things to get into, and I want to make sure everything's as clear and concise as possible. So let's start with the very specific book that you choose for me to read. So some stipulations of what this entails. The idea is that I am having this challenge with myself and some of my friends where we each recommend a book to each other based off of the things that they have said that they like. And we try to find a book that we feel fits those things. We recommend them to each other. And then we also include our subscribers, and you all get to decide a book that you really think that we're going to like based off of what we say our tastes are, what we tend to like to read. And then we end up kind of having a competition to see, quote unquote, who knows our tastes best. And it's just kind of a fun little game to see who gives the best recommendations, even though it's really not that serious. But at the end of it all, we're going to do a discussion video where we go into all the books that we ended up reading. A lot of them are going to have overlap, of course, between at least two of us. So for example, I recommended to my friend Roger The Rise of the Ranger, and that means I've read that, and then he's going to have read it. So there will be at least two of us within that video who have read that book, so we can have a little bit of discussion. Some of the books, all three of us will have read, and that will make for a really fun discussion as well. We probably won't be going into spoilers for the books that we discuss. It's just going to be like a mix of a wrap-up, but it's including everybody else in a little bit more because all of you have a say in what we end up picking up. I do want to give a heads up about what they've already picked for me so that you kind of have an idea of what your competition is here. And additionally, my patrons, I decided to also have them participate. So then it's not just of my two friends and all of you, but it's also patrons too. So the pick from my friend Roger is Dragon Mage. This is currently a fantasy standalone. If I'm not mistaken, I think Roger has said the author wanted to write another, but it's kind of on hold indefinitely, the sequel, because of some things in their personal life, but that it stands on its own. And it's got a main character that forms this really beautiful bond with a dragon, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that it also has really fantastic neurodivergence representation, which is something that I always appreciate seeing in books. I love when our characters represent groups that typically don't get to be the main characters. I think that's wonderful. And when it really feels as though the author is honoring them as a protagonist and ensuring that they get to shine and that they get to have their stories highlighted. It's very loved among self-pub and indie fantasy circles, but sadly, as is the case with a lot of self-pub books, I don't know that it gets as much attention in the mainstream, you could say. But I'm really looking forward to reading this one. I think it's pretty chonky too, so I'm quite excited. And then Jashana's pick for me is called An Accident of Stars, and it's a portal fantasy. And because Roger has also read this one, Roger has told me that he feels like it handles the portal fantasy story exceptionally, where it really dives into the trauma of being forced into this other world and everything you've left behind and the mental health toll that it takes on you to have this happen. It's not just like a fun little like, oh, I guess I'm in this other world now, and then nobody acts in a believable way or anything. And I believe that this one is a duology, and it's more epic fantasy. So epic fantasy, portal fantasy. And then my patrons, the one that ended up winning, it was pretty close, but the one that ended up winning was River Enchanted. And I think the sequel is called A Fire Endless. This is the same author who wrote Divine Rivals. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this one is adult fantasy as opposed to young adult, but I could be wrong about that. Or maybe the characters are a little older. I think it's more folk tale or folklore than Divine Rivals was, but I definitely am really excited about this one. I'm really excited about all of their picks. So the way that all of you are going to give your vote, you could say, is that if there's something that, to your knowledge, I haven't read that you're like, this is something you would love. It can be indie, it can be traditionally published, it can be popular, it can be lesser known. Whatever it is, whatever thing you think is going to go up against those, give that recommendation. And if you look through the comments and you see somebody already has recommended the thing that you think is going to be great, just like that comment. You don't have to say that same thing. You can just like the comment, and whichever recommendation has the most likes, that'll be the book that I pick up. A couple of exceptions, of course, is if for whatever reason it's very difficult to access the book, I don't imagine that'll be a problem, but I might then try to look at what the next most upvoted one is. But if that's not an issue, then the other thing that could present itself is that I have already read it, and if that's the case, also I will just look at whatever the next most upvoted is. I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be so much fun. There's not necessarily a set date for when we're going to do the discussion video, but it will take place over on my collaborative channel, World Hoppers. As always, if you don't know, World Hoppers, all the AdSense goes to charity. So the idea is that it's going to be a fun, as I said, kind of wrap-up style discussion video / competition, and we're going to have all of the AdSense made from that go to charity. And I think this is a great opportunity. You've probably heard me mention these friends before, or if you maybe watch more of the collaborative type of videos I do, you've probably seen these two friends of mine, but they do each have their own channels, and I think this will be a fun way to give them some love as well. I'll have their channels, of course, linked in the description bar in case you want to check them out now. They already had their subscribers' picks already picked out for them, and I've already given my recommendations to both of them. As I already let you know, they've given their recommendations to me. So now it's just up to you. It's time to see what your recommendation is. I can't wait. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be so much fun. On the topic of books that you all recommended that I'm going to be getting around to, the next A Fantasy Fan Reads is going to be for steampunk. I've mentioned this a few times, and the video, my plan is for it to either come out toward the end of March or maybe early April. But for February, I'm going to do a mini one, and that one is going to be A Fantasy Fan Reads Contemporary Romance. I did already pick up an Abby Jimenez book because I've had a lot of you recommend this author to me in the past. So I did already pick up one of their books, and additionally, besides just the fantasy pick that all of you are having for the first part of this I discussed, for the A Fantasy Fan Reads Contemporary Romance, let me know what your recommendations are for those. I'll try to find the ones that I see get recommended the most or get upvoted the most, and I'll try to check those out as well. It's not going to be as long of a video as the fantasy romance one was, or the one that I'm going to be doing for steampunk, because it is going to be kind of like a quick little bonus one. So my goal is to read at least 3, maybe up to 5, because contemporary romance tends to be less daunting than an epic fantasy or things like that. And I do want to see who are the ones that people are like, this is great. I've read all of Emily Henry, so just a heads up, don't recommend any Emily Henry because I've read it all. And I just picked up an Abby Jimenez. I picked up the Part of Your World. If you really think I should just read more Abby Jimenez, that's totally fine. You can recommend more of their works. But let me know what other ones you really think I should try. I've read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, and I read her a second one after that, and I'm completely forgetting the name of it, but not Bride. I haven't picked up Bride. But anyway, Bride to me is like, I don't really feel like it's contemporary romance. If a lot of people really want me to pick that one up, I'm happy to do so. But I also feel like it doesn't quite fit because it has paranormal elements to it. So I'm trying to refrain from the ones that have paranormal elements and just stick to real life. But we'll see. If it gets recommended a lot, I'm open to checking it out. So there's another group of things to potentially give me recommendations for. I mentioned the steampunk books. I went through all of the community tab recommendations for steampunk as well as my patrons' recommendations, and I'm going to let you know now everything I'm picking up or plan to pick up for that one, so you kind of have a heads up. First, we had Solace by Gail Carriger. I've already read this one, so I'm already part of the way there. And then An Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors. This one I'm very excited about. I saw it recommended multiple times, and when it was recommended, it was stated by people that it is incredibly, incredibly underhyped. And I think it's a completed trilogy at this point, too, so it's always nice when the series is done. Solace is also completed. And then we have Legacy of Brightwash. This was my patron pick for this particular reading that we're going to be doing. And this one is one where over on the collaborative channel I mentioned World Hoppers a little while back, I did a video with a couple of other reviewers talking about self-pub fantasy. And Legacy of Brightwash, both of the individuals who were in that video with me, both of them hyped this book up a lot. And they talked about how it is emotionally gutting. It's absolutely fantastic. The setting is different. And it also is hard to pin down exactly what genre it is. And that all piqued my interest already. So I actually already had a copy of this. So when I saw it getting brought up again by my patrons for their want of what to read for the steampunk video, I was like, okay, this one, I feel like I gotta try to find a way to get around to this one. The Infernal Devices. So I've tried Cassandra Clare before. In high school, I read the Are They Siblings or Are They Not? First, what is it, Shadowhunters? I read the first one in high school, which was a very long time ago. So I don't really take seriously, not because I was young, I'm not trying to dismiss young people's reading experiences, but just because it was a while ago and I don't remember it very well. It's just I remember that trope very distinctly. But regardless, I had tried that, didn't really work. Then Swordcatcher came out, it's adult fantasy. I was like, well, maybe I'll try this one. And I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't really loving it either, and I made it pretty far in. It's a pretty long book. And at some point I just sort of DNF'd because it felt like a mashup of a lot of what I've read before. But I kind of liked the other things that it felt like more than I liked Swordcatcher. And I just wasn't that invested, even though I didn't dislike it. There are books I have completed that I dislike more than that book. I just knew I wasn't going to probably ever become that invested because I think I made it at least 75 to 80% in to that book. So kind of two strikes currently, but I'm very open to trying more. And I've heard Infernal Devices and... what's the other one? I know there's a lot in the Shadowhunters universe. There's another one that people always point to as phenomenal, and even if you don't like the other series, that these one or two series are the ones that everybody really likes. So I'm really hopeful. And then after that, we have the Wickwire Watch. This is actually another self-pub fantasy. Really looking forward to this one. I think it is a fantasy steampunk mystery. So that sounds like a lot of fun. This next one I'm going to mention is, of all of them, the one that if I have to drop something, this one might be it. The book is Bone Shaker. I don't recall this one being mentioned too many times in the suggestions, but it was mentioned, and I think it's a book that somebody gave to me. Somebody was getting rid of books, and they're like, here, you can take these. And I sorted through them, and I found the ones that I was like, okay, my interest is piqued, and the other ones I'm like, maybe not as much. And Bone Shaker, I'm pretty sure, is one that I kept. So I think I already have it, which is why I was like, I have it. And this would be a potentially good opportunity to get around to it. Perdido Street Station. I've been meaning to read this one for so long because my husband Sean really likes Perdido Street Station. And my friend Roger, who I mentioned earlier, he's going to be reading Perdido Street Station because Roger's very sweet and he's friends with both myself and my husband Sean. And Sean's tastes don't often overlap with mine, and Roger just feels like, or I should say mine and Roger's, because Roger and I read a lot of the same stuff. But Roger, being a really lovely, sweet friend, wanted to try to read something that Sean really likes, so that he can have something to talk to Sean about more than just a previous book that we'd read together that isn't fantasy. It's it's literary fiction that we'd read. But anyway, Roger's just very nice, and he wanted to read something that Sean likes. But I've been meaning to read Perdido Street Station for so long. So now I'm like, okay, my husband loves it. I've been meaning to read it for forever. Roger's going to read it. It just seems like it'd be a fun time for the three of us to get to chat about it. And maybe we'll even do a discussion. I know it's weird and there's bug people. And Sean has warned me there's some Deus Ex Machina in it. So I'm fully prepared for there to be some convenient moments a couple of times. But it also got recommended, if that wasn't clear, within the steampunk recommendations. Just a quick note. Something else that is going to be discussed within the steampunk video is what is the definition of steampunk and gas lamp. That was another factor in this, steampunk and gas lamp. What are the technical definitions and makeups of these subgenres, and do these books actually fulfill those things, or are they just not quote unquote, medieval fantasy or classic fantasy? And that, I think, will be a fun thing to discuss. And I am curious if Perdido Street Station fits within steampunk, because I know it certainly is more modern, but I don't know if I typically think of it as steampunk, but I'll find out. So that'll be a fun thing. A Winter's Promise. This one got brought up quite often, and this one I was able to snag from my library, so I actually already have it. And then Jacoby. I know nothing about this series, but it was mentioned a couple of times, and I saw somebody selling it on Pango for pretty cheap, so I went ahead and checked this one out. I haven't read it yet, but I went ahead and purchased it. But I think I especially wanted to give this one a go because most of the things on this list are adult fantasy. And I wanted to try to mix in a little bit more YA because I think this one's YA, if I'm not mistaken. And then last would be Stormglass. This one didn't get mentioned much, but the plea for me to read this one definitely had my interest piqued. It sounded really good, and I'm very curious to see my thoughts on it. So those are all the ones that are going to be picked up for the steampunk video. I just recently read Blood Over Brighthaven. I feel like I could maybe include that in the discussion, even though it wasn't formally decided on as one of the books for that. But I might include it. The problem is, here's the problem, okay? It was so good. I just feel like it's not fair to compare that book to anything else, because I feel like I could be wrong. Maybe I'll love almost everything or all of it. That'd be awesome. But maybe I'll love everything I pick up for this steampunk reading vlog. But I have run into a problem that I ran into last year, which is that I found one of my favorite things ever last year. It was Age of Madness. Yes, it did find its way into another video, of course. But last year, I read Age of Madness toward the beginning of the year, and then the rest of the year, you all had to put up with me constantly being like, oh my gosh, it's so good. And that is going to be Blood Over Brighthaven now. And because of that, I'm like, do I include it in the steampunk video? Because I know I want to do a dedicated review for it. I want to hype it up everywhere I can. I already have video ideas as a result of reading that one of other types of recommendations I could do. So I'm like, do I squeeze it into that? And part of me is like, I mean, I kind of want to because one, it does, I think, fit into aspects of what we think of when we think of steampunk. But two, this author, I think, just writes incredible stories, and I want them to have more eyes on them. So I don't know, there's a part of me that's like, who cares if I talk about it all the time? Because it deserves to be highlighted a little bit more, I think. I don't know, we'll see. Let me know if you have thoughts on that. It was so good. I can't wait to talk about that one further. That's not really what this video is, though, but I will discuss it in depth at some point. Oh, I can't wait. It was so good. It was so good. As I was reading it, I was like, please don't tank, please don't tank. You're perfect right now. You're perfect. And then it just kept being amazing. And then the end was so good. And this author does not hold back, which I knew from Sword of Kaigen, but also I just wasn't sure with this one. And they did it again. They did it again. It's so good. Anyway, that's it for a You Choose, my TBR, and then other things. Kind of a quick recap in case, because it was a lot of information. Let me know for the Who Knows Our Taste Best what you want me to read. Then let me know if you have any recommendations for the kind of quick little one-off of contemporary romance. And then let me know your suggestions for what you think the next A Fantasy Fan Reads video should be after the steampunk one. That one won't be decided on here. Like I said, I'm going to try to see what's mentioned the most often and then have a poll. It can be either another genre or it can be a subgenre of fantasy, either one. That's it, though, for this mix of things video. Thanks so much in advance for any recommendations that you leave. As always, thanks so much for just hanging out and talking about books. It's always the best. I hope you have a great rest of your day, though, and I'll see you later. Bye.